we're back. In episode 70, I said we'd be talking about the port of Invader to the ATTiny85 microcontroller, programmed in C using SSD 1306X LED library and the Arduino IDE for editing. All the way back in episode 4, about 3 years ago, I created Invader for the Arduino Nano clone and showed the ATTiny85 microcontroller and just how tiny it is next to the already small Arduino Nano clone. I tried to port Invader to the ATTiny85 back then and just wasn't happy with how it was working, so I decided to shelve it and move on to something else. Anyhow, 3 years later, I decided to give it another try. I found a new library that works much better. It can drive the SSD 1306 OLED screen, the same screen I use for the Arduino project. The library can be found on GitHub here. So here's my first attempt at a breadboard circuit. The ATTiny85 only has 8 pins compared to the Arduino Nano clone's 22. After hooking up the power and the display, you are only left with 3 pins, and one of those pins is the reset pin. So there are some clever tricks needed in order to use the pin as an input. With just the right resistors, you can check for a specific voltage drop in code and use that pin for an input without resetting the ATTiny. Here's a test of this in action. Once I had proof that it worked, I cleaned up my breadboard design and started coding Invader. So here's what my final C code looks like. And here are my sprites. I used this little device to load my program onto the ATTiny. The flashing LED shows it's being copied over now. Once done, I just plug it in, and there it is. Now we hold down the left button to start the game. The first thing you'll notice is that the Invader drops down a full 8 pixels. After he reaches the edge of the screen. I can move a sprite smoothly on the x-axis, but only 8 pixel increments on the y. I've been in touch with the author of the library, and he's looking into this. More buttons and even sound are possible with the ATTiny85, with some very clever use of resistors and programming seen here. You can buy all the parts to build one of these yourself, but I'm terrible at soldering, so I built my limited version on a breadboard instead. I wish you could buy one of these assembled. Just look at all these games that are playable on it. Then I realized I already coded a full version of Space Invaders in C using the Raylib framework. I showed it back in episode 50, and I thought I'd see if I could use some of my code from that version on the ATTiny85. So here's the full version of Invaders for the ATTiny. I even have an animated Invader on the title screen. You can see I have 2 different types of Invaders. I also have the UFO flying across the top of the screen. But unfortunately, because they drop down 8 pixels at a time, game over is pretty quick. Let's restart it and try to hit that saucer. And there is a level finished. When we start the next level, it gets a little faster. There's a much better Space Invaders remake for the ATTiny here, but it requires that the Tiny be wired up in a specific way. I followed the schematic that goes with a library I used for my version. If you haven't checked out my other videos, I'll leave a link in the description where you can find them. This video brings me up to 71 episodes in total. That about wraps up episode 71 of My Journey in Game Programming. Please like and subscribe and leave any comments or suggestions you may have that could make these a better experience. Until then, bye. I'll talk to you next time.